Well, for this week, you have 3 chapters in the textbook that you should read through and become familiar with the content. In this video lecture, I am just going to give you a brief overview of both how to develop the methods section for your research study, and then we're going to give you a broad overview in the area of statistics. As you consider writing the methods section for your final CAP, first of all, an overview of the methods section. Make sure you're including the participants, your procedures, which would include your instruments and other apparatus you might be using, and then your data analysis. The basic principle is less is more and simple is better. So try to be as clear as possible as you write your methods section, and try to keep it simple, not complicated. Try to make it streamlined. And I always say, think of writing your methods section so that someone could take it and actually do your study based on how well you've written your methods. As you consider writing about your participants, what you're trying to do is describe who is actually involved in your study. So make sure you include things like the age, the gender, any training level that might have an impact. Also, the number of participants, which has already been determined for you. And if you're writing a research methods study, loss of participants. In Chapter 5, which we have not gotten to yet, there's quite a bit about how to protect your participant as relates to the safety and welfare of those who are involved in research. So I would say you might want to look through just an overview of that as you write your methods section for this week. After you describe your participants in your study, then you want to get into the procedures, and you're basically going to describe what will happen. When your study is taking place, where it will take place, how much time, over duration will it take place, if you have the opportunity to do a pilot study, which in this case you will not, how you plan to acquire data, collect it, record it, score it. So as you describe the procedures, you're basically presenting your plan. You might include how long, how intense, how often the treatment will be. For instance, if I'm going to do a weight training program, it might be 3 days a week for 45 minutes. And I want to also, as I'm doing my planning, how I'm going to make sure my participants adhere to the protocol of the procedures. And again, how you're going to treat the participants in your study. So try to be as specific as you can as you describe the actual procedures you're going to have your participants go through. Sometimes you'll see describing the instruments and apparatus in a separate section under methods, but in our case, we're combining the instruments along with procedures. So under your procedure section, you will include the instruments that you plan to use. And again, as you consider the instruments, you always want to consider the validity and reliability of the instrument that you'll be using, supporting that with research studies that have proven validity and reliability. Other things you might want to consider is the access you have to that equipment or tests. Obviously, you need to be trained in how to use the equipment and instruments that you plan to use to collect the data. So as you describe the instruments, you want to describe them, including the validity and reliability of them. You want to include pictures, photographs, and then any kind of scoring method you plan to use as you use these instruments to collect the data. Now, after you have described your participants and then given a good overview of the procedures that you plan to do and the instruments you plan to collect the data with, your final section of the methods section would be how do you plan to analyze the data. Of course, this is a very important part of your research study. You want to make sure that you have a correct analysis and a correct interpretation. In your particular study for this class, you're doing an experimental design, and you're going to select a topic first, and then you identify the independent variable that you will be manipulating, and then also identifying the dependent variable and how the independent variable affects the dependent variable. Statistical test on the data, you're going to do what we call a gain score analysis to analyze the data. And this is a statistical test you can use that's not real complicated. There is a separate video that will go step by step through how to actually do a gain score analysis to analyze your data. So at this time, I'm not going to get into that. But I do recommend that you watch that video. As we get into the area of statistics, just a brief overview with some concepts as relates to statistics. We use statistics as an objective way that we can interpret the collection of the data that we have. There's the different types of statistics that we can use on our data. Some fall under the category of descriptive techniques, correlational techniques, and then statistics that look specifically at the differences among groups. When we talk about descriptive statistics, that's exactly what they do. They describe a set of data that you've collected. We use descriptive statistics to help us organize, simplify, and summarize data that we collect. The data that we collect, a set of scores, we call that a distribution. And the original measurements is what we would call the raw scores. And the descriptive statistics that we use would fall under two categories, either measures of central tendency and measures of variability. And I'm sure these terms you're already familiar with, so we will just briefly review them. So the measure of central tendency that we use, the mean, the median, the mode. The mean is the average of your scores. The median is the exact midpoint of your scores. And the mode would be the most frequently occurring score. And then your variability scores, which again is a descriptive statistic. We would talk about standard deviation. And we'd also talk about the range of your scores. When we consider correlational statistics, what we're interested here now are the relationships among variables and the strength of those relationships. And so you will see, as you read research studies, you'll see coefficient correlation, which is a little r, and equal to 0.07, which would show that there is some correlation between the two variables that you're studying. It's important to recognize that although two variables are related, you cannot, through correlational statistics, say that variable A causes variable B. And so correlational statistics just shows you that there is a relationship among variables, but not a cause-effect relationship. So in discussing descriptive statistics, correlational statistics, and then finally inferential statistics, when we use inferential statistics, now we can make inferences. We're looking at differences between groups, and based on what we find through our analysis of the data, we can actually infer conclusions. So we can say there is a cause and effect. So A causes B. Reliability is important. This is where we get into p-values, and you can say with a level of confidence that the results you received was not based on chance. And so examples of inferential statistics would include t-tests, ANOVAs, MANOVAs would be typical inferential statistical tests. So as we get into inferential statistics, we talk about that probability, and we establish an alpha level, and typically you'll see alpha levels set at 0.05, sometimes 0.01, but again, this is just stating that you can say with confidence at a 95% level that the results that you got through this research is not based on chance. And so, again, we'll get a little more into this later, and I don't want to bog you down with heavy statistical concepts, but as you write your method section this week, remember that you will be doing a gains analysis for your handling of the data. If we talk about the statistical analysis of data in research, the good news is now in today's society, computers are so much of what we use that you can see statistical programs used in offices, labs, and even at home with certain hardware and software programs. Typically for use of statistics, some programs that are popular would be the SAS. Also, one that's very popular used in our area would be SPSS. And then even for simple calculations and statistical analysis, the Excel tool pack. So that's just a brief overview of the 3 chapters that are required for you to read this week. I encourage you to get into those chapters, read the content, and then you should be able to take your quiz that is due this week. Also, make sure that you follow the steps for writing your methods section. And as always, if you have questions or concerns, please reach out to me. Have a great week.